Lord, bring in all these amazing people placed in front of us, your word. Lord, open our hearts and minds to your word, to the Bible, and Lord.
That was awesome. So tonight we're going to keep going in our series on believe, the Gospel of John. That's the theme, the main message of John's Gospel, John's presentation of the life and ministry of Jesus is, he said, I've written these things so that you will believe. That's why I've chosen to write the accounts I have. There's so many other things about Jesus' life and ministries, but John said, I picked these out because I think this presents a very balanced picture of what Jesus' life and ministry is all about. And it will compel you to believe. If you don't believe, it's not because it's not been clearly laid out. The concept of understanding the mission. Understanding the mission. There's a lot of people can get off track in business because they don't understand what their business is, or their employees don't understand what their business is. I was surprised to learn that McDonald's really, at the core, is a real estate company. It's not really a hamburger place with awesome fries. Be quiet. It's awesome fries. Yeah.
Their fries are
It is. That's a fact. Okay. But it's not a fast food joint. It's definitely not a fast food joint. Thanks for McDonald's now. But it's not about that. They own so much real estate around the world because they buy all these prime corner lots. They sell hamburgers to pay off the real estate bills, so they are a filthy rich company because of that. They own tons of real estate. Looking at them on the surface, you'd say they're a mediocre run, mediocre food kind of place. You're going to debate me on that. They're evil. It's good on the better side of mediocre? Okay. It's fine. It's adequate. Okay? It'll do. Kind of thing. But they have a different mission and a different purpose in mind. You have to know the purpose. You have to understand what's important to be able to accomplish what needs to be accomplished. And so what we're going to look at tonight is Jesus had a grasp on what his mission was. He had a firm grasp of what he was about. Because if you were kind of along for the ride in Jesus' ministry and kind of watching him, you'd likely come to the conclusion that he was about healing people. He was about about teaching people in ways that they were amazed. Those were the things that he was about if you just kind of watched him on the surface. But Jesus did those things for a bigger picture. He knew his mission. He knew what he was here to accomplish. And so tonight we're going to talk about anticipating the cross. And in John chapter 12, first thing we're going to see about this, there's an intentional turning now toward the cross in Jesus' ministry. I love how it's Matthew. The Gospel of Matthew lays out Jesus' ministry, because partway through the book of Matthew, it says, and Jesus resolutely set out for Jerusalem. And it goes on a couple chapters later, and Jesus set his face toward Jerusalem. And Jesus was on a mission to get to Jerusalem. Why was he on a mission to get to Jerusalem? Because he knew what had to happen there, because he knew what he was about. And Matthew lays that out kind of in succession all throughout the last part of that gospel. And kind of points us to the fact that even long before Jesus got to Jerusalem, his eye was on the cross. His eye was on what he was going to accomplish there. John has given us some direction, some of that direction, and some of those hints, and some of that conversation. But tonight it's going to be really clear. So Jesus came for a purpose. He had a mission, and it was clear. It was clear to him what he was here to do. He didn't have any questions about that. And he actually communicated that to people really well. Even when he was a little kid, a 12-year-old in the temple. Remember what he told his parents? Did he not know that I would
be about my Father's business?
Bingo. Okay? My Father has given me a job to do. My Heavenly Father has given me a job. And so as a 12-year-old, he's communicating that. Later on in his ministry, he said, I've come to seek and save. Finish it for me. That which was lost, okay? I've not come to call the righteous, but I've come to call sinners to repentance. Yes. And so Jesus was really clear about what he was here for. His main purpose was not to perform healings, not to be a teacher that amazed people, not to be just a kind person on earth. He had a mission, and that mission was to lay down his life so that all men could come to the Father. And that wasn't an easy or comfortable. Have you ever had to take a trip that you didn't want to take because when you got there you were going to have to encounter people you didn't want to encounter or do things you didn't want to do? You know, it's like the worst of all family vacations, right? So you're going to see that horrible family member, whatever. And it's like I'm going there, and I know what lies before me, and I'm not looking forward to this. I'm not looking forward to this at all. That was Jesus' life essentially, because he knew how his life was going to end, and so it's like, oh, this is ahead of me, and it's weighing on me, and so we'll see that tonight.
Well, he knows he'll be resurrected, though. So,
but yeah, we'll look at that. Yes, true. So there's both sides of that. So he saw the glory, but he saw the agony as well. And what he was agonizing over wasn't that, oh, my life is going to end, woe is me. The agony comes in the fact that, look around the room for a minute. Okay? And now, think of all the sins of all those people sitting there all around there. Okay? That's a lot, right? Don't add yours in because we don't want to make it too much more. But think of all the sins of everybody sitting in the room here. Jesus took the weight of all those sins. He took the weight of the sin of the world. That was the agonizing part of it. Part of what he was doing was bearing that sin. He prayed about this on the night before his crucifixion. You remember the story in the Garden of Gethsemane. He prayed about this, and it was causing him such agony that he sweat blood.
Sweat blood, yes.
Yes, sweat blood.
That's what happens when the human is under extreme stress.
And that was his response, his body's response to the stress that he was under. But this account that we're going to read about tonight, dealing with that same challenge, that same wrestling through this, but it's a couple days earlier. We ended last week in the middle of chapter 12, and we said it was likely Tuesday of the week of Jesus' crucifixion. He was crucified on Friday. And so this is that same Tuesday, probably. So let's look at chapter 12, verse 27. Now, Jesus said, "Now my soul has become troubled. And what shall I say? Father, save me from this hour. But for this purpose I came to this hour. Father, glorify your name." Then a voice came out of heaven. "I have both glorified it and will glorify it again." So the crowd of people who stood by and heard it were saying that it had thundered. Others were saying an angel had spoken to him. Jesus answered and said, This voice has not come for my sake, but for your sakes. Now judgment is upon the world, and the ruler of this world will be sent out. And if I am lifted up from this earth, I will draw all men to myself. But he was saying this to indicate the kind of death by which he was to die. So Jesus knew his mission, but within that there's a dilemma that he faced. In that first part, you see the dilemma? You see the challenge that Jesus is, the stress and the struggle that Jesus is going through. We see that he was troubled. It says there, now my soul has become troubled. That word troubled is to be agitated. It's like, everything's going well in your life, and then someone takes your life, like you're a snow globe, and just shakes it up, and you're like, what in the world is happening? What is going on? It's that the literal word means to shake something back and forth. I've become troubled. I'm shaken. I don't know what's going on here, and it's hard to know how to interact with this. This is a challenge. It's an inward upheaval or torment that someone has. I think probably we can all relate to that on some level. We can relate to that idea of something in our life being thrown in there that has just thrown everything off. Our life getting shaken up. It could be a health thing. It could be a friendship, relationship thing. A mental, emotional thing going on. It can be, it could be a whole lot of things. It could be a money thing. But it just comes in, it shakes up our lives. And we start to feel that weight and that pressure and that stress. And we feel like someone is taking us like a rag doll and shaking us. That's the word trouble. But look how Jesus handles being troubled. What's the first thing he does? I'm troubled. I'm troubled in my spirit. What's the very first thing he does?
Praise.
He prays. Okay, he turns to God. What shall I say? Father, I'm troubled. I'm bringing it to God. I'm bringing it to my Heavenly Father in being honest and saying, this is troubling to me. In the Garden of Gethsemane, same troubling feeling Jesus is having. What does he do? Father, I'm bringing this request to you. I'm bringing this need to you. I'm acting in dependence on you. I'm telling you where I'm at. He turned to God. Then the second thing he does, Father, save me from this hour. What's he saying in this next sentence? But for this purpose, I came to this hour. How does that fit in with what he's saying? In that shell, right? The John Paul time. What is he saying here? But for this purpose, I came to this hour. He's saying, I know my purpose. I know why I'm here. Yes, this is hard. This is difficult. It's troubling. I'm expressing my dependence on you, Father, but I know I'm right where you want me. I know this is exactly where I'm supposed to be. He changes focus to the big picture. Have you ever gotten so focused on the circumstances that you miss the big picture? Jesus changed his focus. First, he changed his focus to the Father, and then he changed his focus to the big picture. Where am I at? Am I doing the thing God wants me to do? You know what? Sometimes we have trouble in our own lives, and y'all may have never done this, but the trouble is on account of your own stupidity, my own stupidity. Sometimes we create. You did that once?
I do that all the time.
Okay. We do stuff that is like we think we're doing, something that won't.
You think you're working smarter, but you cause more problems.
We're not walking in dependence on God. We're not walking according to what God called us to do. And so we create more trouble for our own selves. We create this problem. Sometimes we face trouble because of our own selves. But there's a lot of times But life just happens to us. We face that sometimes because we're doing exactly what God told us to do. Sometimes because we're living, and the world we live in is just sinful. But we've got to take a look at the big picture. First, I'm having this inner turmoil. Father, I'm depending on you. Second, God, I'm wanting to be right in the middle of your will. I'm wanting to do exactly what you've called me to do. The pattern, Jesus lays out this pattern that we can follow. He lays out this example for us to turn to God, to focus on the bigger picture. Because when I see the bigger picture, when I put my trouble in light of eternity, the New Testament tells us it calls our troubles light and momentary. We face light, momentary troubles. You know how that's Paul, right? Paul wrote that. Is that right?
But do not consider the suffering of this world to be compared to the future glory or something like that.
That's it. You're on track with me there. Good job. And that's Paul writing that. And he's writing that because he's looking at not the circumstances, he's looking at the big picture. In Thessalonians, he says, comfort one another with the hope that this life isn't all there is. He said, those who are alive and remain will be caught up together with them in the clouds, and we will be with the Lord forever. Comfort one another with these words. Help each other keep perspective on what is important. Keep the big picture. Jesus said, I'm going through this turmoil, but I see the big picture. This is the third time that we see Jesus, an audible voice from heaven, speaking to and affirming Jesus. At his baptism, at the transfiguration, where he shows Peter, James, and John a glimpse of his glory, and then at this moment, as he's setting his attention and he's realizing where he's going, he receives this affirmation from God that he's doing exactly what he's been called to do. God says, I've not only glorified you, I'm going to bring more glory. It's not just a past tense thing. There is glory to come. I will glorify my name again through you. So you have brought me glory with your ministry, but there will be more glory to come. And so that affirmation, that stay on track, keep working. He goes on to talk about the impact of Jesus' obedience. John shows us this. So Jesus obeys, and look at verses 31 and 32. Because Jesus eventually is going to die on the cross, and on the surface, it looks like a defeat. On the surface, it looks like things have gone wrong, terribly wrong. But it's truly a victory. Here's Jesus explains it. He says, now judgment is on this world, and here's why it's a victory. Now the ruler of this world will be cast out, and if I am lifted up from the earth, I will draw all men to myself. So Jesus said to them, for a little while longer, the light is among you. Walk while you have the light, so that darkness will not overtake you. He who walks in the darkness does not know where he goes. While you have the light, believe in the light, so that you may become sons of light. These things Jesus spoke, and he went away and hid himself from them. So what's the impact of Jesus' obedience? Jesus resolutely walking to the cross, him taking those intentional steps. First thing we see is the defeat of the enemy, right? You see that here?
This is actually prophesied in Genesis 3:15 when God says, I will put enmity between you and the woman, between your seed and her seed. He shall bruise your head, you shall bruise his heel.
Right.
So in the end, even though, the heel is bruised, the head is crushed.
Yes, the head of the enemy is crushed. And that's what we see right here. The ruler of this world will be cast out. And Fred is exactly right. This has been prophesied since the beginning, since the fall of man. 6,000 years ago, the fall of man, and in the Garden of Eden. And the cross has been prophesied. And the Redeemer has been promised since that point. This is not a concept God came up with, a plan on the fly. This was the plan. This is God's program. And so the first thing we see is that the enemy will be defeated and will be cast out. Now, it's not an immediate destruction. So, you look at this, you're like, well, Satan is still alive and well. I think we can all testify to that on our lives, right? Satan is still alive and well on planet Earth. Things are not, sin has not, is not completely wiped out. I struggle with it every day. You struggle with it every day. But can something be defeated and still have a role, still have authority? Yeah, absolutely. Think of this in a smaller scale. Our elections are going to happen next week. There will be people who are defeated next Tuesday. Someone who has a place in office. Different places all over the country. Someone who has a place in office will be defeated on Tuesday. They continue to hold office for several more months after that, until January.
And they could be reelected another day.
They could be reelected, but talking about just the fact that you're defeated doesn't necessarily mean that you're immediately cut off. There's still, at times, a role that is played by that person. And that is what's happening. God said, you're defeated, but I'm going to allow you to roam and to have your rule in your dominion on planet Earth. So, yes, Satan's defeated, but Satan is not gone. Yes, sin is defeated, but we still have the presence of sin around us. Second benefit, or second, impact of Jesus' obedience is that Jesus says, I will draw all men to myself. If I'm lifted up from the earth, I will draw all men to myself. Does that mean everybody in the world is going to be saved? No. Does that mean everyone in the world has an opportunity to be saved? Yes. His sacrifice was sufficient for every person in the world. Was sufficient for every person for all human history. Doesn't mean everyone's going to do it, but he is drawing all men to himself. He is calling all people to himself. Everybody faces that decision. What do I do with Jesus? I have to make that decision. I have to come to that crossroads. What am I going to do about Jesus? The cross forces that decision on everyone. And that's what he says. If I'm lifted up, I will draw all men to myself. Some will reject me, and some will follow me. Some will say yes, and some will say no. Some will live for me, some will fight against me for their whole lives. In verses 33 and 34, I skipped over those here. The people take what Jesus says here, and they try to turn it into this theological debate. And they get sidetracked with the head knowledge, and Jesus is like, no, let's live in the practical world. Let's live in the real world here. There are some important things that you're missing. And you're missing them because you want to turn everything into this deep theological thing, and you want to have a debate about it, but you don't want to live it out. You don't want to change your life. You don't want to conform. So then down in verse 35, he talks about the urgency of our response. And he says, for a little while longer, the light is among you. And the light is what dispels the darkness. The light is what allows us to respond to God. It is all in our lives. None of us are guaranteed a certain number of years. Jesus is saying, I'm not here forever for you. I'm here for a certain amount of time. And when I'm gone, your opportunity will be gone. None of us are guaranteed a certain number of years in life. When our life is over, our opportunity to respond to God ends. And that's the decision the Bible tells us. It's given a man who wants to die, and then judgment. So our response to faith is critical. And Jesus talks about this concept of light and dark because it's really important. Because when we run away from the light, things get darker. Have you ever noticed that? If there's one light source on a dark night, and you're running away from the light, things are going to get darker. If there's one light source and you put it out, even if there is a lot of light, though, you still have a shadow. That's dark. It's the the only way to dispel that darkness is with light. The only way to overcome that darkness is with light. Jesus, verse 36, ends with this. These things Jesus spoke, and then he went away and hid himself from them. He went away and hid himself from them. This wasn't a temporary thing. This right here is Jesus' last public conversation venue, his last interaction. He wasn't joking around when he said, the light is only with you for a little while. In that same conversation, he ends it by leaving them and going away where they do not see him. For 3.5 years, Jesus had shown them that he's God and that they have to believe in him for salvation. And so, the second part of this talks about Jesus' public ministry and just kind of how that plays out. So, Jesus had told them over and over again their need to believe in him. He had taught them, he'd shown them miracles, had shared parables with them, he'd shown them his life of compassion, his life of caring, his life of purpose. Sometimes the thing that stands out about Jesus is how determined he is to do what's right. But now, that last verse there, he went away and hid himself. Now that all ended. There's no more teaching, no more parables, no more miracles. You're left with the decision. What do I do with what I heard from Jesus? If they hadn't believed, they probably wouldn't believe. Because they've come to that place in their lives. Let's continue on verse 7. But though he performed so many signs before them, yet they were not believing in him. This was to fulfill the word of Isaiah the prophet, which he spoke. Lord, who has believed our report? And to whom has the arm of the Lord been revealed? For this reason, they could not believe. For Isaiah said again, he has blinded their eyes, and he hardened their hearts, so that they would not see with their eyes and perceive with their heart, and be converted, and I heal them. But Kenny and I were talking about a passage in Luke 16. It's the story of a rich man. Jesus told the story of a rich man and a poor man who died. The rich man had not followed God with his life, and he goes to places of torment and Hades. The poor man had followed Jesus, and he goes to a place of paradise in Hades. And they're separated by this huge chasm. And we have this interaction that goes on that Jesus tells about. And one of the things Jesus tells them is that the rich man is so miserable. He's like, "Can you please just a drop of water on the tip of your finger? Can you touch that to my tongue? That will give me so much relief. That's how much agony I'm in. That's how miserable the suffering is." And he says, "No, that can't be done. I can't do that." He says, "Okay, then please, would you send back someone to go tell my brothers? When you tell someone to go tell my brothers, you've got to turn. You've got to change. You have to turn to Christ. You have to turn your life to Christ." In response, essentially, was what we read right here. They've seen the miracles. They heard the teaching. They have everything. If someone comes back from the dead, it's not going to change their mind because they've already hardened their hearts. They've already made a decision. They've already turned their hearts away. We saw a perfect example of that in the life of Lazarus, or in the death of Lazarus, right? Guy who's been dead 4 days. Jesus raises him back to life. Does the whole community accept that? No. People want to kill Jesus more. People also want to put to death Lazarus, because he's the evidence that Jesus is more than just another man. So he's talking about people who refuse to believe. He's talking about people who make the choice to reject God. People wonder, how can God send people to hell? How can the loving God do that? How can the loving God banish someone to this eternal sentence?
The rebellion was eternal, so the judgment had to be eternal.
Well, yeah, but the deliverance was also all-encompassing. Jesus put the cross in the way of every person's path to hell. The cross blocks that path, and you have to avoid it. You have to reject the cross in order to spend eternity away from God. That's a conscious decision. You have to make. Jesus is talking about some of these difficult decisions. He's talking about the hardening of hearts. He's talking about, and that's the first. One of the first things that he brings up here is they would not believe. They were not believing in him. This is fulfill the word of Isaiah the prophet when he said, "Lord, who has believed our report, and to whom has the arm of the Lord been revealed?" For this reason, they could not believe. They wouldn't believe. They refused to believe. They put out the light. They walked away from the light. They got to such a place of darkness that they couldn't. They avoided the light. You can only say no so many times. You can only reject so many times. It's a refusal to respond in faith. And the decision to not follow Christ leads to a hardening, a callousness. When I was little, all summer long, pretty much I lived up north. All summer long, it was actually warm. Winter long, it was all winter long, freezing. But all summer long, we would run around without shoes on because it was out in the country. And so we had a gravel driveway. Beginning of the summer, it was like, because our feet were really from not, being wearing shoes all winter. There's nothing like it, but it's probably equivalent to stuff on Lego. By the a couple of weeks, 2, 3, 4 weeks into the summer, our feet were so calloused that we would sprint across the driveway, and we would run through the yard, and it didn't matter what we stepped on, because our feet were hardened. Because what would we do? We just kept pushing through. When when my bottom of my feet would have said, "Stop! Protect me." No, I'm not going to be able to respond. I'm not going to be able to feel anything. My bottom of my feet couldn't feel anything anymore because they were calloused. They were hardened. That's some people's response. They callous themselves. They harden themselves. And when faced with the truth again, they feel nothing. They would get callous on your hands, something like that. You can rub on it, and it doesn't. Part of your hand feels one way, but the part completely hard in your fingers there. Don't really feel anything. There's nothing to really respond to. Isaiah 55:6 says, "Seek the Lord while he may be found. Call upon him while he is near." Because you push God away so many times, and eventually there's no getting back. There's a point where we harden our hearts so much that God says, "I'm going to continue to harden your heart." He talks about that there. He talks about that here. I'm going to continue to harden your heart because that was your decision. You pushed me away. You said no. So many had hardened hearts. There were some that wouldn't take a stand for Jesus. Let's jump down to verse 42. Nevertheless, many even of the rulers. So he's talking about the religious leaders here. This is a positive verse. Many of the religious leaders, the rulers, believed in him. But because of the Pharisees, they were not confessing him, for they feared that they would be put out of the synagogue. For they loved the approval of men rather than the approval of God. But Jesus is talking about the crisis of decision that he brings into people's lives. Some people harden themselves to Christ. These guys, essentially, what do they want? They want the best of both worlds, right? I want to be able to, I like the stuff Jesus has to say, but I'm not going to change anything about my life. I'm not going to let the Jesus thing flow over into the rest of my life. I'm not going to let it impact anything else. It's not going to affect my decisions. It's not going to affect how I interact with people. I'm going to keep it in the box over here because I kind of like it. But it's got to stay in the box and nice, neat package over here. The rest of my life is mine. Jesus was talking earlier in his ministry about what it means to follow him in Matthew 10, verse 28. Jesus said, "Do not fear those who kill the body, but are unable to kill the soul, but rather fear him who is able to destroy both soul and body in hell." And then jumping down to verse 32 of Matthew 10. "Therefore, everyone who confesses me," Jesus said, "everyone who confesses me before men, I will also confess him before my Father who is in heaven. But whoever denies me before men, I will also deny him before my Father who is in heaven." Jesus said, there's a way to follow me. You have to follow me if you're going to follow me. Not on your terms. It's not on my terms. You can't rewrite what it means to follow Jesus. This crisis of belief is a decision for every person, and Jesus is laying out how people struggle with that decision regarding their hearts through wanting to keep Jesus off to the side of their life. What are you going to do with Jesus? What do you do about Jesus? That's the biggest question. How do you respond? Is there a hardening in your life to Jesus? You keep Jesus off to the side? You keep Jesus away from parts of your life? Part of my life is mine. But I go to Refuge Ministry, I go to church on Sunday, I'll do this. And in those times, I'm going to live for Jesus. But the rest of the week is mine. Because I want to fit in with people more than I want to please God. These men would rather, but they love the approval of men rather than the approval of God. People of Jesus' day would give him this last chance. And it says he hid himself from them. Closing arguments like this is trial. The closing arguments have been presented. There's no more information. Everything's done. What are you going to do about Jesus? What are you going to do about Jesus? So John provided this summary, and let's look at the last couple of verses of this chapter. John provided this summary, and this is a summary of the truth Jesus proclaimed. And Jesus cried out and said, and so John's taking some of these things that Jesus talked about from his ministry. He who believes in me does not believe in me, but in him who sent me. He who sees me sees the one who sent me. I have come as a light into the world, so that everyone who believes in me will not remain in darkness. If anyone hears my saying and does not keep them, I do not judge him. For I did not come to judge the world, but to save the world. He who rejects me and does not receive my saying, he has one who judges him. The word I spoke is what will judge him at the last day. For I did not speak on my own initiative, but the Father himself has given me a commandment as to what to say and what to speak. I know that his commandment is eternal life. Therefore, the things I speak just as the Father has told me. What was Jesus' message? Jesus told them, or John reminding us. Let me sum up what Jesus said. Let me sum up the things that Jesus called people to. First, Jesus was sent by the Father, tells us in this passage. Jesus is from God. He was on. God had sent him to redeem the world. He had the mission. Jesus was the perfect expression. He was the perfect revelation of God. Jesus said, if you've seen me, you've seen the Father. He was an exact representation of the character and nature of God. He also, a big part of his message was that Jesus came to bring hope and salvation. I've come to seek and save that which was lost, but you have to believe. Jesus brought the message of hope and salvation. Along with that comes the challenging message of the coming judgment. Those who reject Christ will face judgment. And the last thing that Jesus kind of sums up, or John sums up in this from Jesus' ministry, was that Jesus called all to believe in him. And that was the same call that God has given to us, to believe in my Son. This is my beloved Son, in whom I am well pleased. I glorify you, and I will continue to glorify you. He came in obedience to the Father, to complete the will of the Father, to provide redemption and salvation for us. So this message, and what did the people of Jesus say going to do? He hid himself. There's no more decisions, or no more information, nothing else. You've got enough. Share the gospel with people who have plenty of information to make the decision. It's a hard issue. They know this stuff, but there's a hard issue going on. And that's the challenge that we face. How do you respond to Jesus? Many of that day chose not to follow him. This week I got two things for you. One is a question for you, Connor. Is there a step God has called you to take? Is there a step God's called you to take? Because that idea of responding to the light, responding while it's still light, isn't just about salvation. It's about our walk of obedience. So if you trust in Christ as your Savior, you still have that crisis every time God gives you a truth to follow, a life change to make. Have you done the last thing God told you to do? If not, don't put it off. Don't harden your heart toward God. Don't delay in your obedience. The second one is the one I told you up front. I was going to tell you. Read through the book of Philippians a couple times this week if you're not doing the Bible study, if you're not already studying it. Read through it a couple times because next week we're going to look at a big picture of the book of Philippians. And hopefully you'll come prepared for that. Hopefully you'll be able to interact and that will just heighten all that we can glean from God's word. So the challenge in this in this last passage here is that there is an end to the opportunity. There's a closure of the seasons of our life that we can respond to God. There's never a better time to respond to what God is telling you to do. There's never been a better time to respond to God's call to come to salvation than right now, because the longer you wait, the more difficult that decision will be. The more consequences you'll come across in the meantime. Let's pray. Father, thank you for this challenge. Jesus, thank you for reminding of the importance of your decision to obey you now. Respond to your call now. Burn our sovereign. Turn our attention from this gospel. Let's continue to show